what is grief? So an open question to all of you, what is grief? If you want to write it in the chat, you can write it in the chat. If you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand and I can ask you to press the space bar and you can share. For you, what does it mean? What is grief? And then I will share you some definitions with you regarding that. Because if we are able to explore what is grief, then we're able to explore what is positive grief, and we can define both of those. So I don't see anything coming through on chat as yet, but feel free to share whatever. There is no wrong answer. And the question is, what does grief mean to you? Okay, so we have loss of someone you love, something or someone you love. Brilliant. Thank you for that sharing, Mary. Anyone else? Loss of something or someone dear to you, to your heart. Thank you. Sadness at losing someone you love. Brilliant. Thank you for that. And if you do want to add more, that's great. So grief is what you've shared there, but grief is not just related to losing someone. Grief can be related to any kind of loss. It could be the loss of our job. It could be loss of a role. It could be loss of a big financial amount. It could be loss of our business. It could be loss of a relationship, whether through divorce or something else, or it could be loss of a place like the Grenfell Tower or the Twin Towers. All of these things can cause us to feel grief. So that is one of the things we're sharing. And our focus today will be on grief, in particular related to the loss of someone we love, someone close to us. That will be our focus, but much of what will be shared will translate across all these other types of grief. So I would like to share with you two scenarios of my own experiences of grief. So the first one I will briefly share, and then we'll have more as we go through the session, is in October 2019, a good friend of mine called Bobby Shah, similar to my age, passed away from an illness. And, you know, we were aware he wasn't well, and then, you know, got the message on an afternoon that he's passed away. And the feelings I had during that day and thereafter were nothing compared to what I've had in a long time. They were feelings of disbelief, feelings of confusion, feelings of a real sense of loss and remorse and regret, and that aspect that, you know, something is really missing. Bobby and our friend circle, you know, we spent a lot of time together, like when you were growing up, being to each, you know, to each other's weddings, children being born, buying our homes, and, you know, sharing lots of time in our youth as we're growing up together. And during the 2 years or thereafter onwards, I was looking forward to sharing more moments with Bobby and our other friends. So moments of, you know, celebrating a 50th birthday, moments of our redecorated home, moments of children getting older, and sharing these moments that we've been sharing. And that sudden realization that I won't have these moments, and I've missed these moments, and I miss Bobby, were the feelings I was having. And I was crying a lot that day, uncontrollably, not knowing, comforting my family, my wife and each other, and also reaching out and calling some friends and just asking how they're doing and how they're feeling. And as I mentioned, you know, as a happiness coach, I'm used to feeling positive, I'm used to feeling happy, I'm used to feeling grateful. And these feelings of sadness and depression and remorse and real sense of loss I hadn't felt in a long time, or to this depth. So that is one aspect, and I'll share more about those feelings then thereafter. The other example I want to share is it was 2 weeks before Christmas, around that time last year. a Thursday morning, my father hadn't been feeling well, and he went into the hospital. We just thought, you know, they'd be given some antibiotics for an infection, and a few days later, he'll be back home. So he had gone off into the hospital. Later that day, we spoke and checked in, and they said, you know, they're monitoring and checking stuff. And then in the evening, got the call, and the call was his health deteriorated. We're moving into ICU. You know, we're getting the operation people ready. We're getting other people ready, and we don't know if he's going to make it through the night. So he'd gone in for an infection, what we thought was going to be treated with antibiotics, and then later that day, we're getting the news that we're not even sure if he's going to make it through the night. And they're asking us about, you know, last wishes and so forth, and preparing us in that manner. That night was a long night. The next morning, we're working through things and so forth. And around midday, we get the call, and it says he's on his last stages. 3 of you can come to the ICU to, you know, see him in his last few hours. My brother from the US was flying in. They had landed around midday. They had to quarantine because we were in lockdown at that time. They couldn't come. So myself, my older brother, and my nephew, we went to the hospital and were there for those last few hours. And 36 hours from him going into the hospital, he passed away. So it was sudden, it was unexpected, and it was something we weren't ready for or expecting to occur. So that are the 2 scenarios of grief that I've experienced. So what is grief? So grief is a change. It's an unwanted change. So this description of what grief is, it covers the grief of the loss of someone, it covers the grief of the loss of a job, and being put on furlough, loss of a business, any kind of loss where we have a change that's occurred that we didn't want. It could be a pandemic, it could be lockdowns, like I mentioned, Grenfell, it could be being displaced from where we live to somewhere else, whether due to eviction or being in a war-torn environment or whatever. So grief is a change, and it's a change that we didn't want. So that's what one example or definition of grief is. From a book called Grief, a novel by Andrew Holleran. It's not one I've read, but from the courses and things I've doing, it's one which shares a description which I thought was really powerful. It says, grief is what you have after someone you love dies. It is the only thing left of that person. Your love for, you're missing them, and as long as you have that back, you're not alone, you have them. It also goes on to say, the dead exist in our hearts. So it's that message that, you know, we've lost someone, and that loss and that love is what is there. And this next bit is what I found really beneficial. Your grief is a substitute for their presence on earth. And that really makes a lot of sense. Their presence on earth was there, they've moved on, so grief is what's replaced that presence on earth. That's what we feel, that's what is there in that way. As we go on to positive grief in a moment, I'll share a few more examples regarding grief, but for now, work with the basis that grief is an unwanted change. If you have been working with that important chart, I invite you now to cross off 6 items from that list of your least 6 important from the list that you had, to just go through and cross those items off. And give you a moment to do that. So